You've heard of Murphy's Law. It says, if anything can go wrong, it will go wrong. You've likely had that feeling. You've tackled some do-it-yourself project, estimating the amount of time that it will take to carry it out and convincing yourself how easy it's going to be, only to experience unforeseen problems which take more time and effort to resolve. Projects seldom go as anticipated, and we quote Murphy's Law. That law was attributed to an Air Force engineer named Captain Edward Murphy in the 1950s. Since that time, several similar observations have been composed, all of them referred to also as Murphy's Law. Here are a few examples. If something cannot go wrong, it will anyway. If everything seems to be going well, you have obviously overlooked something. Nothing is as easy as it looks. Everything takes longer than you think. Left to themselves, things will go from bad to worse. Now, I know those laws are intended to be humorous and not realistic observations of the way life really works, but we sometimes think that that's how life works out. Sometimes people who have a pessimistic attitude figure that that's how life is. They are pessimistic. They have a negative thinking process. Some people have an Eeyore attitude. You know that character from the Winnie the Pooh stories. Eeyore looks so gloomy. He always sounds so dreary when he talks. Oh, bother. His voice matches his attitude. When Winnie the Pooh greets him, "Good morning, Eeyore," he responds, "If it is a good morning, which I doubt." When Christopher Robin gave him a red balloon, Eeyore said, "It's a cheerful color. Guess I'll have to get used to it." When something fell from the sky and Rabbit jumped to the conclusion that the sky was falling, Eeyore responded, "The sky is finally falling. Always knew it would." Do you know somebody like that? An Eeyore attitude? As Christians, we are not pessimistic. We are absolute optimists. We always look on the bright side because we know God's plan. We know His future is bright. So we are people who seek the silver lining behind the dark clouds of pain and sorrow and suffering and difficulty. Our banner verse is Romans 8:28, which says, "We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." We are growing weary of this epidemic. At first, it might have seemed like an adventure, but now it's more of a pain. Maybe it sounds something like this at your house. Week 1. Guess what, kids? You get an extra week of spring break. Week 2. Okay, we're going to be doing homeschooling now, but it'll be fun, you'll see. Week 3. I think you kids need to go outside and play more. Week 4. Your junk is strewn all over the house. Clean this room, clean your room, clean the garage, clean the basement. Week 5. Why did we have so many children? You see, stress affects us. This stress is affecting us. Someone said absence makes the heart grow fonder. Never-ending presence? Yeah, not so much. A few weeks ago, I conducted an informal Facebook poll asking people how the epidemic was affecting them and how they were coping with it. Many said they were doing a thorough spring cleaning. Some mentioned a few projects that they had finally completed. A few said they were taking advantage of the extra family time. That was obviously before weeks 4 or 5. A couple said they were being forced to slow down, and they discovered they enjoyed that. Taco Bell came out with a promotion to help people cope. They named Tuesday as Taco Tuesday and offered free tacos to all as a way of easing the stress. You don't even have to buy anything to receive a free taco. All you have to do is go through their drive-thru, and for every person in the car, a free taco is handed out the window. We heard the announcement of that on a Tuesday morning just before we were leaving to come in to the church office, so we planned to take advantage of the offer. We drove through Canton South. There is a Taco Bell on Route 800 right beside I-77. Went through the drive-thru, ordered our 2 free tacos, and because I didn't want to take advantage of their generosity, we also ordered a large drink. Then we jumped on 77, headed north, got off on Route 62 to head east. There is another Taco Bell on Route 62 on the east side of Canton. We pulled in there, ordered our free tacos, and then we also ordered a bean and rice burrito. And then we headed to Louisville, where there is another Taco Bell. And you guessed it, we got in the drive-thru lane, pulled in, or picked up our free tacos, and ordered also a cheese wrap. We ate all those tacos and the rest of that food, and then Holly wanted to repeat the circuit. I said, no mas, yo no quiero Taco Bell anymore. It was probably not a good way to cope with the coronavirus. How are you coping? The fear has largely passed by now. It's been replaced with impatience and, in some cases, anger. In several states, angry protesters line up at the Capitol building demanding that restrictions be lifted. Some angrily suggest conspiracy theories. Did the Chinese government release this virus on purpose as retribution because of the new trade agreement arrangements, which makes trade less advantageous for them than it used to be? Are Democratic politicians using this as a weapon to allow the economy to be destroyed, since it is President Trump's strongest platform for re-election? Some angrily accuse the president or our Congress of not reacting soon enough, not doing enough, that is. Let's not be pessimistic. Let's not be angry accusers. Let's not be impatient. Let's take a look at Romans 8:28 more carefully and find the silver lining. It reads again, we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. You see, God will bless us, even in this time of adversity. God is always working for our good. Now, this verse doesn't teach us that God only provides good for us and never anything bad will happen to us or come into our life. That's the way some want to read this verse, perhaps based upon the King James wording, which says, we know that all things work together for good to them that love God. Now, let's compare that with the New International Version again, which says, we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him. The difference is subtle, but significant. Maybe you noticed it as we compared the readings. The King James Version says, all things work together for good. The New International Version says, in all things God works for our good. The point is, not everything that happens to Christian people is good. But that's how the King James Version makes it sound. All things work together for the good of those who love him. But as we saw in the New International Version, which I think is a more accurate translation here, God works for the good in all things, even bad circumstances. God works to bring good to us. That is silver lining theology. We need to know that God's good is better than our understanding of good. God's good is more beneficial for us over the long term, and so we learn to trust him. Some tend to view things from only a temporal or earthly, and therefore temporary perspective. They don't consider God's greater eternal good. They cannot accept God's greater good if it differs from their idea of what might be good for them. But we know that God has a plan, and it is a good plan. And God's will never be thwarted by any crisis or difficulty we'll experience in this world. Last week we discussed that the coronavirus is not the judgment of God. It's not the will of God either. Some things happen that are not a part of God's plan because human beings have the freedom to choose to do as we please, and that sometimes leads to disaster. Some bad things happen because we live in a world that is morally fallen due to mankind's sinfulness. In other words, we live in an imperfect world. We should expect, therefore, that imperfect things will happen. And so there will be difficulties. There will be crises, just like this virus. As Christians, we don't have the promise of protection from such calamity. When it comes to living in a fallen world, we are not offered immunity, but we are offered eternity. And that is a much greater gift. That is our silver lining. That is why we can look on the bright side. It's because of that truth that the Apostle Paul wrote these words in 2 Corinthians 4, verses 16 through 18. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes on not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, and what is unseen is eternal. Those are silver lining verses. God will bless us, even through times like these we are living in now. And we can grow through this time of struggle and suffering. We can grow, first of all, by learning from the experience. Whenever I counsel someone who is going through a divorce, I always ask that person, what have you learned from this experience? I ask that question and make them think about it and answer it because I don't want them repeating in future relationships the errors they committed which contributed to the destruction of that one. It's a healthy question for all of us to ask ourselves in ill-fated circumstances. What are we learning from this in order for us to grow from it? So what have we learned from this difficult time? We have learned, I hope, better priorities. Let me give you an example. Over the last 6 weeks, there have been no televised sports other than reruns of old games years ago. And we are doing fine. In fact, maybe we are doing much better because we now have more time for the more important. I haven't watched ESPN since February, and I don't miss it. We should be dismayed at the amount of money we are paying sports stars and celebrities. We are making multimillionaires out of people who provide nothing of value to our society except possibly entertainment. Is entertainment really worth all of that? Is entertainment more valuable than education, and yet teachers make less than 1% of the average NBA salary, which, by the way, is $7.7 million. The average player in the NBA makes $7.7 million, and we are putting that money in his pocket. Is entertainment more valuable than our health or our safety? Most nurses, EMTs, police officers, firefighters, security guards, soldiers also make less than 1% of that average NBA salary. And we could make the same case for farmers who put food on our tables, or social workers who help the homeless, the orphaned, and the disadvantaged, or numerous other people who contribute much more significantly to our society than athletes and celebrities generally do. I hope we've come to realize that we place far too much emphasis on lesser things and fail to properly recognize the more important. We are learning a lot about priorities. We are also learning how valuable our relationships are. When we cannot enjoy them, we miss each other. We can't get together with friends. We can't have parties and activities. We can't celebrate church on Sunday mornings. Oh, I know we have the online services, but it's just not the same, is it? We were created for social interaction. And this isolation we are going through is difficult for us. Several grandparents I've talked to over the past few weeks are grieving because they cannot spend time with their grandchildren. They can't hold their little ones. One grandfather told me, "My life revolves around my grandchildren, and now all I can do is wave to them through the window." We've come to find out just how important those relationships are. We need them. And I'm sure we won't take them for granted in the future. We've also come to find out and learn how important our family time is. Several families are reconnecting again because they have more time to do that now. They aren't encumbered by a full schedule of trying to rush here and there and be at that activity and another one, or have their children in this program or another, and they're just able to relax and be a family together. One of the responses I received from that Facebook poll I took said this: "We had been too busy with our careers. Now we are spending more time together. I hope to see some of these changes stay." A few days ago, one of our graduating seniors posted this thought about her senior year ending the way that it did. She said, "Today we found out we will not be returning to school for the remainder of the year. Though it's sad, I also think of it as a blessing. This time of quarantine has helped me learn new things and appreciate all that God has blessed me with. I've been able to really focus on the important things in life: God, family, and friends, and not to take a second for granted. Yes, it's sad I can't attend my senior prom or have senior spirit week, but in the grand scheme of things, that's not the most important thing in the world." God bless her for coming to that true conclusion. I want to challenge you to take a close look at your priorities and to adopt those which are consistent with God, family, and friends. A church member here recently posted this on her Facebook page. "In the rush to get back to normal, use this time to consider which parts of normal are worth rushing back to." Amen to that. You see, many of the things that we chase are not as important as we think they are. And do you know what usually gets sacrificed when we pursue lesser goals and pleasures? It's spiritual priorities. It breaks my heart to see a family pursue a lesser important priority and put the spiritual ones on the shelf in order to do so. God created the Sabbath day as a day of rest. He also created it as a day of worship, for God's people to have a weekly reminder of the purpose of life so they would not get caught up in worldly pursuits. Maybe we need more than a vaccine to bring healing to this nation. Maybe, in fact, we have needed to be isolated from the distractions of the world so that we can be reminded to focus on what is most important: our relationship with Jesus. This epidemic is temporary. Within weeks, or maybe a couple of months, we will return to some sense of normalcy. It may take longer to recover fully, but I doubt that it will take as long as it did for previous generations to recover from the Great Depression. That recovery period lasted over a decade. My grandparents survived the Great Depression, and then 4 years of the horrors and uncertainties of World War II. And now we refer to theirs as the greatest generation. They were silver lining people. They had an optimism and a faith that would not quit. May that faith be yours. May it guide you to live correctly. You see, there is a silver lining for your life. For the bright glory of heaven awaits you on the other side of death's dark door. You live that faith, and God will bless you.